Chapter 10. Another Orphan. Seeing Serena and holding Becca for the first time, it brought back all of those memories. I looked at Becca, took in that straight dark hair and those pale-as-ice blue eyes, and it just shook me. Here was Jacob's half-sister, both of them fathered by that monster. Life had emerged from such evil and pain and death. Others would have taken her, wanted to take her, but I told them no. I told them Serena wanted me to take Becca, had begged me to, and that I could handle it. It was the least I could do for her. If only I had tried harder, if only I could have convinced her and Brad to come with us. In the end, Becca was family. She fit. And I can't imagine life without her. Jess's journal. Anthony Ridley, the town doctor, was waiting by the closed door. He shook his head slightly at Jess as she approached the room where they were holding Serena. "She's in and out of consciousness," he told her. "If I had been able to treat her sooner... But she's got blood poisoning, a high fever, and we don't have any antibiotics. I take it you know her?" Jess nodded. "I met her on the way back here. We were on the outskirts of Clinton. Her group was moving toward Clinton, and we were leaving. From what I could see, there wasn't anything left for them to go back to. A lot of troop movements back and forth, different factions, and Clinton had practically been burned to the ground." Todd had rejoined her and was listening intently. "I asked her to come with us, but she had a man with her, a boy and a girl." Her voice trailed off, and both men looked grim. "She was definitely on her own," Todd said. "One of the militia patrols found her on the edge of town, unconscious in the trees. If it hadn't been for the baby crying, we would have never known she was there. But I know this, there wasn't anyone else with her." "Can I see her now?" The doctor nodded. Sarah offered to take the baby, who was sleeping peacefully in Jess's arms, and Jess shook her head. If Serena was awake, she would want to see Becca. The room was dark, except for a small light in the corner, and it held a certain unexplainable smell. Serena was a tiny mound in the bed, barely breathing, her arm bandaged and hair matted with filth. Her skin was covered with a sheen of sweat, and it looked mottled, red and white blotched, except for one eye which was swollen, and the eye socket looked fractured. She was painfully thin, and Jess was sure this had affected her ability to produce any milk. The baby, Becca, was deeply asleep in Jess's arms, her tiny belly swollen and full of milk. Serena's eyes fluttered when Jess said her name, but she didn't stir, not once. Hours passed. People came and went, and Jess sat in a small chair by Serena's cot, waiting for Serena to wake up, worrying about the others, and wondering if she should go ahead and send for David and the kids. In the end, a diaper change with Becca awake and fretful decided the matter. The baby kicked at Jess irritably, reaching for her mother over and over. Serena finally roused, her eyes dull and confused. She turned her head and saw Jess. "Jess," she whispered, "they found you." Jess smiled at the woman and took her cold hand in her warm ones. How could Serena be sweating and cold at the same time? Anthony Ridley had been in twice since Jess sat down to check on Serena. He had explained again, quietly, that there was nothing more that he could do for her. His knowledge was limited, after all. He was actually just a medical student and had been away in medical school before the collapse. He'd explained that the mottled skin, the difficulty breathing, all of these things pointed toward a steady decline and eventual death. The end was coming soon. In some ways, it was harder to deal with. Here was a living, breathing human being. There would be no sudden death, only a slow journey into oblivion. Jess had seen plenty of violent, sudden death. This was new and uncharted territory. She waited for Serena to say more, but she had slipped away into unconsciousness. Jess sat there, watching Serena and Becca. Becca had cuddled against her mother and fallen asleep again, her tiny body curled against her mother. Reassured by her presence, Jess wondered for the 100th time what had happened to Serena, Brad, and the 2 children. Her eyes became heavy, and just as she was about to slip into a doze, Serena spoke. Jess's eyes flew open. Serena was awake and looked lucid. "You were right, Jess. We never should have gone to Clinton." She whispered it, her voice weak and cracked. Jess leaned in close so that she wouldn't miss any words. Words were precious now, numbered and limited. Serena continued. "They're all gone. Brad, Annie, and Max. All of them. I just ran. I didn't know what else to do. I took Becca and I ran." Her words came in short spurts. She sounded winded and exhausted. Jess tried to shush her, to tell her that they had time to talk later, but somehow Serena sensed how little time they had left. She touched her sleeping baby's face gently. "Dark hair and those ice blue eyes, Jess. She's Jacob's sister." Serena turned and smiled at Jess. "You were right about everything. It was okay at first. A struggle, and Brad loved her even though she wasn't his." She stopped, and Jess thought she had fallen back asleep. "Please love her, Jess. Be her mother." The last thing Jess needed was another baby to care for. They were struggling to survive as it was, and she closed her eyes so she couldn't see Serena's face begging her. She didn't want this baby. Jacob, with his dark hair, sometimes brought back nightmarish flashes of those dark months inside of Tent 5, but he was hers and had her deep blue eyes. Becca was what Cooper surely looked like as a baby. She was beautiful, no question, but it would be like having a reminder of that monster day in and day out in her own home. How could Serena ask this of her? She opened her eyes and saw Serena's gaze had not wavered. "You'll be better soon." "Don't lie to me, Jess. I'm dying and I know it. Please take Becca. Take her now and do this for me, please. I know I've no right to ask this, but I need your promise. I need to know that." Again, Serena paused and gathered the strength to continue to speak. "She will be with family who loves her." Jess felt a huge surge of panic. "Serena, I don't know if I can love her like that. She looks so much like him. She felt such a horrible dread in denying this dying woman her request, but the fear it evoked was overwhelming. Serena smiled weakly. "Do you remember what you said to me when we met, Jess? You said that Becca was a part of me and that I would find the love inside me when she was born. You were right. She's my child. She's all things good, despite her beginnings." She took a deep breath. "So, Jess, I'm asking you to love my child as your own. Please. You, no one else. Let me die knowing she is loved, because you have that in you like no one else I know." And after a long, painful moment, Jess had said yes, the tears welling in her eyes. There had been no more words between them. Serena's plea had taken every last bit of life and strength that she had in her. Moments later, the woman fell into a restless sleep, her breathing hitching and rattling in her throat. Dr. Ridley assured her there was nothing more to be done, and Jess asked Todd for a ride back home. They bundled the baby up in a swath of blankets. The night was full of stars and frigid. Jess covered Becca's face lightly, trying to keep the baby as warm as possible. The horse's hooves rang out on the cement, echoing off of deserted buildings and past the lowing cattle. They rode back to Jess's little house in silence. As they turned off of 163rd Street, Todd spoke. "She asked you to take the baby, didn't she?" "Yeah." "Are you going to be okay?" he asked kindly. "Sometimes I wonder if any of us will ever be okay again," Jess said softly. "Jess, if anyone can make it, you will. You are stronger than you realize. That woman made the right choice." Todd's words warmed her in the bitter cold of the night. Jess didn't trust herself to answer. The day had been overwhelming. The near future seemed just as daunting. She hugged the squirming baby close and then handed Becca to Todd to hold while she slid off of the horse. "I'll make sure someone lets you know when she wakes up again," Todd said. But Jess knew that Serena probably wouldn't last the night. All of her dwindling energy had been put into making sure Becca was here with Jess and Jacob. "Come in for a cup of coffee?" she found herself asking, her voice cracking with the effort. "No, I'm headed home." Todd reached down and touched her cold cheek with his gloved hand. "Get some food and rest, Jess." In the months that followed, he visited often, bringing extra meat and provisions for Jess and her little family. So did others. The baby thrived, and Jess's small family did as well. Before long, they couldn't imagine their world without Becca in it.